Bahrain qualifying is done, the first of the season. Max Verstappen puts it on pole, but there's a bit more to it than just, the inevitable, Max domination. I think anyway. My name's Tomo. Let's talk about it. Let's firstly start by briefly going over FP3 results. Carlos Sainz went quickest with a 30.824. Haas looks decent over a lap, which bodes well for later. Hulkenberg, a 131.2, put in P9 in FP3. Magnussen, not quite there, but not a million miles off. But the margins at the front, as you can see, look super, super fine. What? Sainz to Perez. I mean, you can include Hulkenberg in that as well. It's like within 0.4. It's interesting FP3 session. It's a session typically you don't learn a huge amount from. It's not anywhere near as relative as FP2 because at the time of day, it's not relative to the conditions we're going to see in qualifying because that's in the evening after FP3, or in the race because that is also later, Bahrain being a late race. The Alpines didn't look great, did they? And Alonso looked very good, but was he on for a Bahrain worldie? Well, qualifying played out as so. Let's start from back to front, and let's start with Alpine. P20 and P19. Ocon was only, that's 23 thousandths off of Logan Sargent, and Logan Sargent was a good 4/10 behind his teammate Alex Albon. So it's not necessarily all bird. It was as bad as it could be, but they are P19 and P20 at the end of the day. And that's not good. There's no way you can look at that and be like, that's okay. No, it's not good. All right. We knew there would be issues for Alpine. It's been shown to us in the plainest, most clear and obvious way. Otmar Safnauer. Oh, he must be feeling some kind of way right now. And I reckon he's a few drinks deep right now, do I, Otmar? Because he was made out by many to be the scapegoat of the problems at Alpine. However, you go through as many team principals as they have with what you had a Beatable, you had Bukowski, you had Safnauer, and now you've got Fama at the wheel, who's got no experience of working directly in a Formula One team, which does make me worry. Meddling from Alpine upper management, Renault upper management. Luca De Maio is not going to be a happy man right now. He should not be a happier man right now. And neither should... Disappointed with Sauber. I've got to be honest, expecting more from them, expecting more progress. Just didn't come, did it? Just didn't quite come for them. And a good couple of tenths off of Magnussen in the end, and I just realised actually in the graphics that Albon is down as a Racing Bull and Ricciardo's down as a Haas for some reason. There you go, classic Tomo. Sargent also going out in Q1, which is disappointing given that Albon was P13 and quite comfortably through in the end. They were close on their first laps, were Alex and Logan, but his second lap didn't improve, or if he did improve, it wasn't enough, anywhere near enough was Logan. So a bit of an opportunity missed for Sargent. So then obviously in Q2, Magnussen was the big one really. Big gap to Nico Hulkenberg. We'll get onto the gaps in a little bit. Nowhere near, which I'm surprised about because I was expecting that Haas car, this new Haas car, to move a bit more in a direction that would suit Kevin Magnussen. However, Nico Hulkenberg decided that would not be the case, okay? Came in and was like, you know what, Nico? I think I got this today. Yeah, Nico, you know what, Nico, you're right. You wouldn't have this. And Kevin didn't have that internal monologue, did he? He didn't bring the goods. But tell you what, this wasn't the only time. Look, I'm guilty more than most of getting carried away with qualifying. And Hulkenberg made Q3, I believe it was 7 times last year. So this Hulkenberg in the top 10 in a Haas isn't that crazy, really, when you deep it. And having a big gap to Magnussen, that's certainly not crazy based off what we saw last year. But given all of the, the tumultuous tale of Gunter out and Komatsu in, and if they have got on top of their tyres, then maybe Hulkenberg doesn't drop like a stone. We can hope. I would love that. If he can get points tomorrow, I would be absolutely chuffed for Nico. I think he deserves it. I really do. Ricciardo Sonoda both going out in Q2, by the way. Tsunoda went quicker than Daniel in Q1 and in Q2. Tsunoda definitely has felt a bit more comfortable, at least today anyway, in that car. Even though Ricciardo, he did go quickest in FP3. I completely forgot to reflect on that. Oh no, he didn't. He went quickest in FP2. Anyway, moving on. Stroll goes out in Q2 as well. Big gap to Fernando in the end, which, again, it's like 4/10 between them, which is about kind of where it is on pace. Fernando is an exceptional driver. Stroll, relative to the normal person, Stroll's an exceptional driver, but is he a Fernando Alonso? No. Nowhere near once again. So Stroll out in Q2. Disappointing, very disappointing given the strides that Aston and Fernando have made. But again, shouldn't be a massive surprise, really, should it? Because then looking at the top 10, well, interesting. So the gap to Hamilton Russell's pretty big, which I was kind of surprised about. It felt like Lewis was just as, if not more, comfortable than George up to this point. Anyway, Piastri and Norris very close. Piastri, I was concerned. I was very concerned because for a bunch of qualifying, Piastri looked away off of Lando. Fortunately, when the time mattered, he pulled it back. But Oscar only got into Q3 by 7/1000ths of a second ahead of Yuki Tsunoda. 7/1000ths of a second. It's nothing. He was very lucky to get through. Lando was pretty lucky. Lando got through in P9 as well into Q3. They both got into Q3 in the end and pretty close between them. But P7 and 8, which, to be fair, considering McLaren's history at Bahrain, slow speed corners, this isn't a type of track where that car really thrives, is it? So I think P7 and 8, they will be fairly satisfied with. And obviously Fernando P6, Checo P5, that's a 4/10, just under 4/10 gap, about 3.5 to Max Verstappen on pole, which again is about where they sit. It is a bit concerned because, Bahrain's the kind of track I expect Checo to do well at. A lot of low speed. Yes, it's not a street circuit, but what makes street circuits good for Checo is that typically the corners are low speed. You don't get these arcing, corners that you get Suzuka S-wise, right? You don't get those kind of corners in cities, do you? That just doesn't work. Like, cities are typically grids, okay? With lots of 90-degree corners. Bahrain's not a city circuit, but you look at the track map and it's much closer to that than it is a Silverstone or a Suzuka, okay? So I was expecting a bit more from Checo. Look, if Checo goes half a tenth quicker, he's P3. So in terms of that way, it's less than is 1.13 off of Leclerc. So if he just hooked it up a little bit more, he could have ended up on the front row for sure, could Checo. But race pace is what counts, and we will get onto race pace very shortly. Don't you worry. Carlos Sainz P4, a tenth exactly behind Charles Leclerc. It's fine. I'm sure he would have backed himself to go quicker than Charles, but Charles is that guy over a lap. And George Russell P3. Shout out George. Great job. Very, very good lap from George Russell. Again, his weekend wasn't looking as strong as Lewis's up to this point, but when it matters, he pulled the lap out for sure. But Max Verstappen P1, a 129.79. 179, should I say. Although, funny enough, that wasn't the quickest time, was it? Because in Q2, Charles Leclerc did a 129.165, which would have been enough for pole. He banked it too early. He went far too early, did Charles. So, interesting one. Obviously, Max it's delivering the lap when it matters, okay? And ended up with a pretty significant gap, over 2/10 to Charles Leclerc. But it wasn't the quickest lap we saw over a single lap at Bahrain in qualifying. So in terms of reading that going forward, I think we've got a battle in terms of pole positions. I think it's going to be Verstappen, Leclerc back to back, Sainz up there occasionally as well, like we saw in Singapore. I think over the course of this season, okay. But at the end of the day, qualifying doesn't win you points. But now let's have a look at the actual gaps between drivers. So if you don't follow me on Twitter already, first of all, what you're doing, okay, at TOMMO'S, get to know. I'm going to keep up to date. I've done it for the last 3 seasons, I think, the head-to-head teammates. But also this year, I'm going to keep the gaps, the average gaps, looking at their best Q1. So if both drivers get to Q2, it will be their best Q2 times. If only one driver gets to Q2, then it will be their best Q1 times in teammate pairings, right? To compare the most comparable laps that have been set at the same time in similar time, right? So this is how we sit after round one. Bahrain, Hulkenberg, Magnussen, the biggest gap. That Q2 gap between, because again, both of them got to Q2, only Hulk got to Q3, so this is their Q2 gap, 0.678 seconds. Massive, huge gap between Hulkenberg and Magnussen, which is concerning for K-Mag, for sure. Alonso to Stroll, just under 4/10, 0.399. Albon to Sargent, 0.373. Verstappen to Perez, 358. Russell to Hamilton, 225. Ocon to Gasly, 155. Tsunoda to Ricciardo, 149. Leclerc Sainz, 0.1. Norris Piastri, 0.069. Nice. And Bottas to Joe, just 1/1000th of a second. Joe messed up that final corner as well. We saw the onboard, and he could have beaten Bottas this time. I don't think it'd been enough to get out of Q1, but very fine margins between the Sauber drivers. Now, this gap is somewhat concerning for, again, Magnussen. Very concerning. Stroll, it's what we should expect. You know, Fernando to Lance, it's a different skill level for sure. Verstappen, Perez, 358. Again, I would have expected Perez to be a bit closer. Lewis won't be happy with that 225 to Russell. Otherwise, again, I think Tsunoda, you know, he seemed to have the legs over Ricciardo over most of today, which, see, Ricciardo's got to turn that around, because Ricciardo's got to beat Tsunoda, like, quite comfortably to really be in with a shot at that Red Bull seat. I mean, less so if Checo has an absolute howler, but, you know, if Tsunoda beats Ricciardo comfortably, and I know this is one qualifying session, right? We've not even seen the race yet. That does give Red Bull a very interesting decision to potentially make. But yeah, all in all, they're going to keep an eye on this. So make sure you follow me on Twitter. We'll keep this going as the season carries on, right? To get a good idea of gaps relative. That's how quali finished. But before we wrap, one more thing I want to cover is the FP2 long runs, because this is what kind of tells us the most about what we should expect for tomorrow. Now, FP2, the long runs in the evening, it's the most representative track characteristics temperature-wise for the race, okay? So these stats, I got these from Chat of the Race. They kind of collated these and totted these all up in terms of when they were doing races, long runs, sorry, not races. When they're doing long runs, the race is tomorrow. When they were doing long runs in FP2, how their laps were averaging out. And both Max and Checo were averaging high 36s. Piastri snuck into a high 36 as well. George and Lewis, low 37s. Norris as well. Leclerc, Sainz. I mean, it's fine margins. What? Russell to Leclerc, which is 4 to 7, split by 0.08 of a second. Alonso's bit slower. Bit slower from Fernando. Stroll actually behind Ricciardo as well, which is interesting. But again, super fine margins. You can see these gaps, right? You can see, you know, Verstappen's got just over 1.3 seconds a lap over Gasly, who was the slowest long runner with the 38s. Albon's long run wasn't great. You know, you look at where he qualified. You know, P13 in the end. His long run, a 37.9. It's behind Hulkenberg, behind Bottas as well, which is a bit concerning for Williams. But yeah, I think this gives us the most to kind of look. You look at this, and then you look at this, and you think Russell's probably in a strong place. You know, as things stand, it's the likelihood of a Verstappen, Perez, Russell podium. Look, we don't know fuel loads. That's the one thing about these long run averages in FP2. We don't know fuel loads. We don't know engine modes. Maybe there is more to come from Ferrari. We know many a time last year they burnt their tyres off and they fell backwards. The word is that they've sorted that out. We'll see. We'll see tomorrow for the race. I'm looking forward to it. That was a very enjoyable qualifying, wasn't it? Don't forget to like the video if you liked it. If you didn't, then dislike it. I'm here for it, all right? Let me know in the comments down below who top three for tomorrow. What do you reckon? I'm gonna go Max. Max, Charles, Checo. Max Charles Checo. I think George will be P4. Maybe Lewis P5. I'm forgetting about science. Max Charles Checo's, that's my top 3. All right. Let me know yours in the comments down below. My name's been Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.